Welcome back to Honoring the Journey. I'm Leslie Neese here with my friend Karen Schock, and we are honoring the journey of an amazing soul, like somebody who I recently met because I was on her podcast. And I immediately said, "Oh my gosh, Karen, we have to have these ladies." Well, we have you on now, Esther, but then we're going to also have your co host on in a couple of weeks. And I'm so excited because the conversation that we had with them, or the conversation that I had with them, was so rich and so amazing. And I know you're going to enjoy Esther Goetz's journey. We're going to be able to honor it today. But let me tell you just a little bit about her, what I know anyway. She is one of the co hosts of Deconstructing Mamas, which is a
Mhm.
podcast that I found during my deconstruction and immediately was like, oh my gosh, I love this. It's hard. And Karen and Esther, you're both going to agree with me here. I know you are. It's hard to find people our age who are going through this. I thought,
Yeah.
am I just going to be friends with millennials for the rest of my life? Not that that's bad. I love them. I have a couple of them myself, but it's just so nice to hear voices that are going through what I'm going through, who are my age, who are in my stage of life. And so, anyway, she is the co host of Deconstructing Mamas, which is great. I highly recommend. And then also, she is Esther the Dolly Mama on Instagram and Moms of Bigs. And she is a budding spiritual director. And I cannot wait to hear more about this because I think this sounds super cool. Esther Goetz, welcome to Honoring the Journey.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me on. I've been looking forward to this conversation for the last few weeks. I don't go on too many podcasts because I'm so busy doing my own, but I love to talk, and I really feel that it's so powerful for us to share our stories and to honor each other's journees. It's
Yeah,
actually
no
the whole
matter what it
reason
looks
I'm
like.
becoming a spiritual director.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. I want to hear more about this.
Yeah, so it feels like, well, here I am, our age. We'll just say our age. And
Midlife.
my kids are kind of grownish and flownish. And I use that term all the time to talk about them
I
because
love that.
yesterday I had a phone call from each one of them. So
Yeah.
and I have four in their 20s, and actually, well, I guess two right now at the very early 30s. So um, I did my job raising my kids. And I felt very strongly about them becoming themselves and being allowed to become themselves completely. And then I found myself adopting a lot of other people in my life. I mean, I've always done that. And I felt really passionate about them becoming themselves.
Yeah.
And so I decided because it sort of fits all of my boxes, it checks all of my boxes, my mothering heart, my fascination with the spiritual journey, and then also just my love for people and their stories. That I thought, well, why don't I become a spiritual director? Because as we call ourselves in our spiritual direction program, we call ourselves spiritual midwives.
Ooh,
Mhm.
I love that.
And so we're not telling anybody what to do. We don't even like the word director. We prefer the word companion.
Yeah.
That
Mhm.
we're coming alongside of you. And I'm binge watching Call the Midwife with my husband. We've been doing it for like a bunch of months. And I've learned so much there about spiritual direction practice from those midwives that
Mm.
basically you're like there with them. They're birthing something. It's not you're not birthing anybody. It's not your baby. They're birthing themselves, which we like to say. And we're there to say, hey, maybe you could push. What about breathing through it? This is the time maybe you could, lean into somebody else. I'm holding your hand, but it's your
Mhm.
journey.
I
I
love
can't
that.
do anything for your journey other than witness it
Mhm.
and cheer
Mm.
you on, root for you, and then maybe, you know, catch the baby on the other side
So it doesn't
with
fall on its
you,
head.
and then
Yeah.
hand it right back to you for you to
Yeah.
nurse it.
Oh,
Yeah, and care for it. Mm.
Esther, I can't even tell you how much I love that because I actually have a story that I wrote in my book that I'm writing about how I have felt, and I didn't even know this at the time about spiritual direction. I felt like my deconstruction was kind of like a birthing process.
Oh, yeah.
Like I was really reluctant. I didn't wanna be born into it. I was like, I'm fine right where I'm at. Thank you very much. Everything makes sense. I have all the answers. All I gotta do is read it in the Bible. Everything is great. And then all of a sudden the contractions started, and that's called questions and doubts. And then they just got closer together. And then finally, like, whoever's giving birth to me, which I'm realizing was myself, was like in transition and there was no stopping it.
Yeah.
And then just like when you're in the womb and you're like, this is perfect, this is great, this is where I want to be, I feel safe, being born into this new reality, seeing how big the world is and how I was so stifled and so unable to move and so restricted and so many rules and religion and all of that. Being born out of that has been freeing, but terrifying. So, what you're telling me, a spiritual director will come alongside me in that process.
Yeah.
That's, and then calling yourself a midwife. This is like crazy. I love it.
I
So
know. I
good.
love that. There's all kinds of verbiage around spiritual direction, but the spiritual midwife is the one I'm kind of
Yeah,
taking personally on that makes the most sense to me. You know, like
that's
it just
so great.
feels
Yeah,
like
it
everybody's like, "Oh,
resonates.
midwife, you get it."
Yeah,
And there's something not sterile about it, you know,
something
hospital
maternal about it
settings,
too.
something maternal, something, yeah, that's like almost mystical and magical. The birthing
Mm,
process, right, is, I mean, we've all done it, I think, and it
yeah,
is. It's some kind of mystery that we cannot understand no matter how much science is around it.
yeah, yeah. It's so
So, yeah.
true.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm excited to see where this goes. So, like, what is the kind of person that would come to you? Is this somebody who's in a transition or?
I thought a lot of times, and we've talked about this in our, intensives, is, I think Carl Jung, or maybe it's Carl Jung. Somebody talks about the beginning of the hero's journey. It's like
Mm.
you know,
Oh,
the
yeah.
Odyssey, right? You're kind of beginning the process of finding who you are,
Mm,
discarding maybe who the world has told you to be, and discovering who you are. We have so many voices that have come at us. For me, it was mostly a high control religion
Yeah.
mm,
that told me who and what to be. But there was also other voices, right? Education, all those systems out there, right? The education system said you have to be smart, you have to perform, you have to do. Um, Even family. I mean, even in my family, even voices that came at me of like, this is what you need to be, a good wife, a good mother.
mm,
There's now new voices that I didn't necessarily have of social media, or I mean, that's a huge one in people's lives.
mm,
Podcasts like the one we're doing now, all those external voices
mm.
that just preach at us from the moment we're born,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, just start getting into us. And I think that the kind of person that comes to me perhaps is like their little voice inside is starting to say,
Mm,
who am I before the world told me who to be?
Wow.
Right? An internal
mhm.
voice that can't be hushed any longer.
Oh, girl.
Can't be
Love
quieted
that.
anymore, right? It's like,
Preach.
and sometimes it happens in midlife, but I think what we're watching in the millennials and even the Gen Z, because they've had
Mhm.
permission to
Yeah,
question and ask,
yeah.
they're asking this question a lot sooner.
Golly, aren't you
It's
just so
so
happy for them?
wonderful. So, like, to be honest with you, my practice is just beginning, but I've been doing this. A lot of younger people are the ones that are asking me to be their spiritual director because they look at me as like, oh, I need like an older, wiser, whatever. But
Mhm.
it's because it's so exciting that they're starting it way sooner. I
Mm.
was in my mid 40s when I was starting to ask that question, or
Same.
maybe early 40s when I was like, hey, this isn't working for me
Wait a
anymore.
minute.
Wait a minute,
I'm
you
not sure I
know?
like this person that I am because I
Right,
don't feel like it really is me.
right.
Yeah,
And I think we're very different. We say we are not therapists because therapy tends to be helping you to kind of function in your day-to-day world and
right.
helping you like unpack all the past. And you do need to do that some in spiritual direction, but we're really concentrating on moving from external authority to internal authority.
Oh, I love that.
If I
Yeah.
could sum that up, it's like, what do you have to say to yourself?
Mm.
Not Hey, what did my pastor tell me? What did that book tell me? And it is obviously our reaction to our lived experiences. So other people have great influence on us. Our lived experience has great influence on, but it's our response to that.
Mm.
It's our, hey, I like this. I don't like this. I mean, can I tell you a scary thing? Like a
Please,
thing I
yes.
never would have done that I did. I'll say two things I've done in my awakening, evolving spiritual journey. And they are um, two things I never would have had permission to do was I read the book You Are Here by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Zen Buddhist.
Mhm.
And I just kind of a scary thing, like, oh my gosh, let me go see. But I found my tendency toward looking to the outer, like maybe maybe it's Buddhism, is the answer. I found that was maybe my tendency in opening the book. But as I was going through it, my new kind of self said, I like some of this,
Mm,
but you know what? Your whole disembodiment thing, that it doesn't sit well with what I'm learning right now about needing to be embodied. Right?
mm,
So I
yes.
like a lot of what you were saying. I can now sit down with my cup of tea, undistracted, and drink it with my whole self. Be fully engaged in the process, be present, right? You are here. But yeah, your disembodiment stuff, that's not for me.
Right, and that's okay.
And that's okay. And then the second thing I did just this weekend and my intensive was we had somebody, this is going to sound like so fun and creepy and weird, explain that he uses tarot cards
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
in his spiritual direction practice. So he gave his whole presentation and it was great and whatever. And something in me, I raised my hand, it was Q&A, and I don't usually do this, but I raised my hand at the end and I said, so can you help me unpack how that's not moving from one form of external authority
Mm,
to another form of external authority?
mm.
And he actually said, really good question. Can I talk to you about that at dinner?
Oh, wow.
Because he had never
Answer.
really thought of that in his practice. Like he was like, oh, what do I need to do to unpack that with my people? Because probably a lot of people are going to come to me, right?
They want the
And
magic
just
8
looking
ball.
for magic answers,
Yeah.
right? The magic 8 ball. And you know what cracked me up? I thought to myself, oh, this used to be so dark and scary. And then I realized how I did that when I was growing up in the more high control religion is I would open my Bible and be like, what verse?
Oh my
And
gosh,
I
me
would like
too.
open it and then
100%.
like point and hope like there was some, and my husband and I would actually say to each other, we can't make this decision until we have a verse.
Oh my, yeah,
And
Mhm.
then so it's the same thing, yet we vilify tarot cards
yeah.
and we vilify anything like, ooh, dreams. Oh, those are so scary. Yet they have a lot of information for us. So I did kind of unpack it with him just a little bit at dinner, but then I did unpack it with another person who's going through the program with me. And she was like, hey, you get to do whatever you want with the tarot deck. If it's coming from inside of you, who
Yeah,
cares?
yeah.
How beautiful. Because obviously, the tarot deck, as I've learned now, is all about archetypes and those calling to us and which ones do we which ones are calling to us, either good or bad, some that rub us the wrong way, some that maybe we relate to. So it was so beautiful. But I was like, I get to question everything.
Isn't that the most fun part about where you're at spiritually? Is
Yeah.
just that beautiful, open, genuine curiosity
Yeah.
about everything and not fear. Because I don't know, I would actually, Esther, if you don't mind sharing a little bit of your background, because we would love to hear people's journeys here and how you got from A to B or A to Z, wherever you're at in the alphabet.
A to a letter that I
Yeah.
just found out was in the English alphabet for my 6-year-old grandson the other day. Ampersand was actually
Ampersand.
part of the alphabet. There were 27 letters. So I say A to ampersand, which is
I
and
love that.
what's next. I just came up with that this week.
Ooh, I love that. That's
So,
brilliant.
yeah, they took it out because it didn't make a sound. But I was like,
So
I was
where did
10 years
your
old when I learned
it
that
didn't make a
ampersand
sound.
was a letter of the alphabet.
That's so cool. Your grandson taught you that. Is
Yeah,
that what
he
you
found that out in kindergarten. Not funny.
There you
so I
go.
love that.
So
Brilliant.
just a silly thing that's
No,
why you
no,
keep
that's
growing,
great.
right?
So where did when did your journey start spiritually? How old were
Yeah, I
you?
mean, I'll just give a really brief
Okay.
history to wrap up because it's like
Mhm.
I'm a missionary kid, grew up overseas in war-torn Ethiopia. So I was a young kid in the middle of a war.
Oof.
And my parents were missionaries. Our job was to keep people out of hell. I took that on with all
Mhm.
the gusto in my little self and I was told I had the gift of evangelism.
Mhm.
In my teens, I mean, I'm telling you, I got 40 people saved. We made a whole club. I made this youth group explode. I just loved telling people that they were going to hell and that I
Mhm.
knew the way out of that. And so I just took that on with all the gusto that anybody could ever take on. That continued into my 20s. I did this at work. I ended up with a Bible study with all these newly saved people. Oh my goodness. It just was um, my mission in life. But I will say, as I've unpacked that, it was all driven by fear.
Fear.
Mhm.
My
Mhm.
Absolutely.
little girl self was so afraid of people going to
Yep.
hell. Well, of me going to hell, and
Right.
then other people going to hell, all that stuff. I was in war. It makes a lot of sense.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not, there was just fear that swirled around all the time. But if I
Mhm.
could control this one thing,
Mhm.
keeping myself out of hell and then keeping others out of hell. But then you realize as you're older, you can't keep others out of hell. They have to make their own choice. So it gets fuzzy. But that was sort of my mission. It was my main mission as I had kids.
Mhm.
Um, my saddest story I ever tell is and it's funny, but it's sad. My 8-year-old daughter holding her brother down, her 4-year-old brother in the back seat of our car, uh, saying, "You have to say the prayer.
Yeah.
You have to say the prayer." And she was afraid herself.
Mm.
And there got to a place, I think, with my kids, that figured out that I loved my theology more than I loved my kids.
Mhm.
Oh.
And I couldn't believe it. Like, and actually, what really was deeper inside of me was I loved my kids
Mm.
Mhm.
more than I loved my theology. My love of my children overcame my fear of eternal conscious torment. Uh,
Mhm.
Mhm.
uh, So love in the end wins.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Love is greater than fear.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just the message that I would say. So at the time I was reading a book, my kids were teenagers. They were pushing back. It was so fun. They were just saying things like, I think the people in the Bible that heard God's voice, those are called like schizophrenics. Like,
Mhm.
so things like that. And then I started to say, like, what do I have to learn from them?
Right.
Instead of what do I have to teach them? And so it was great. It was like a big flip. I was reading a book called The Next Right Thing by Emily P. Freeman, who is really been my spiritual director. She's an author. She is a spiritual director herself, but I didn't know what those words were back then. And she had a chapter said, "Am I being pushed by fear or led by love?"
Mm.
And I started to ask myself that every day
Mm.
about every single thing, parenting, my faith, and to be honest with you, the hell thing came to the forefront, and I
Mhm.
Mhm.
only could say I was being pushed by fear. So a friend and also a friend of mine at the time, a pastor at our church who is had to leave that church, said, "Why do you love hell so much?" Like just little things, right, all the time. But I
Wow.
would say that hell, that idea of eternal conscious torment, is an overarching theme of being pushed by fear.
Right.
It plays
Sure.
out in a million ways in our lives. We are afraid of everything, right? So that would be like the biggest one. But I was afraid of my kids doing the wrong thing, smoking pot, having sex before marriage, not going to church, like leaving church. It plays out everywhere
Mhm.
if the root of your essence is fear based, right?
And you
Instead
don't
of,
even realize that's what it is.
no, you
That's
don't.
the funny thing. You think, "Oh, no, this is not fear. This is compassion."
This is love. It's like
Yes.
twisted around into
Yeah.
some form of love that it's not, right?
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
yes.
It's so,
It's
so
like I'm doing
disarming.
this, this makes me so sad. I'm spanking my kids for their own good out of a
Yep.
Yeah.
loving place. I'm telling them that Jesus died on the cross for their sins when they're 3 and putting those images in front of them.
Yeah.
Totally developmentally mentally inappropriate because I love them.
Yep.
Mhm.
It's so weird how fear and love can be so intertwined, and now I've come to learn that you can't have love and fear at the same time. I mean, like, they're
Yeah. It's
almost
one or the other.
because what happens when you fear is you try to control everything and control everybody, including yourself, your family, your people, everybody that you do love, I think, underneath it all. And so I've learned, and that's my big thing on my Moms of Bigs page is we don't control our kids, we companion them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't control. Love and control are opposites, but control, and then that's the whole like, how do we view God? Is he in control? I mean, it's so many.
I hear so many people that have been coming up against me on my social media, because I've been talking about, listen, there is no fear in love because perfect love casts out fear.
Here, right,
God is love. Okay. Love
right,
doesn't keep a record of wrongs.
right.
Love, is patient and kind and all the things. So, like, why are we saying that he's throwing people into hell? Like, why are we doing this? So I'm saying these things, and people are like, but the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Wisdom. I'm
And
like,
I'm just like,
oh
"Ah,"
no,
but you're taking that word fear, like, is that really the word that was used when
I
this
know.
scripture was written? It's more, reverence. It's different than what you're saying, and but, like,
It's
to be
actually leaning into mystery, that word.
right, yeah,
It's actually the more like
mm,
mystery, mystical. It's not
not having all
fear.
the
It's not
answers.
human fear.
Right,
It's not.
yeah,
We put God in our own image, so we're fine. If we're
yeah,
riddled by fear and we want people to fear us, then yeah, we'll just slong,
we'll
that on,
throw that word in there and
throw that
make them
right
think
onto
that's what it
God.
means. Well,
Create
and then
God in our own
also
image.
I've had people say to me, "Well, you can't take away the justice of God.
I know.
You're just focusing." And I'm like, "Why are you so pumped up about this? Like, did Jesus say it's finished or not?" Like, I'm
I
just asking. You know what I mean? Cuz like I have a feeling that God's justice was satisfied if that's what needed to happen. You know what I mean? Like, why are we so obsessed with making God
Yeah,
into this angry, irritated, ready to throw us into hell the second we mess up? Like, that is horrifying to think
right,
that the creator of the he would create us intentionally to be fallen and disgusting and
right.
then give us an option, but you can believe this and say it out loud and say a prayer and then boom, magically you're going to go to heaven. Like
Yeah,
what?
I've thought a lot about that justice piece because I am an 8 on the Enneagram, and so I am a justice warrior. That's my
Yes.
most healed self is a justice warrior, and I do think that some of my, desire and love for hell, I'm just gonna say it outright, or
Mhm.
was born out of that a beautiful place inside of me that I do want, rights to be made, wrongs to be made right.
Yes, we
And I
all do.
want those who have suffered victims to be vindicated.
Mm.
So that is the beautiful side of it. It's kind of like someone's really suffering or someone's done something really wrong to them. And you want that person to be either vindicated or healed or the wrongs to be made right. But what I've found as I've really gone on my own personal journey to what does that really mean as a justice warrior. And my daughter, she's so cute. She has said to me, I've seen you, Mom, turn from a retributive God to a restorative God. Turn,
Mhm.
Mm.
which true justice, and if you really look at the word justice, if you unpack the word justice, encompasses the Hebrew idea of shalom.
Mm.
And shalom is not the absence of conflict. It's not any of those things. It's not just peace, like, hey, peace out. Everybody feels really happy and good. It is true flourishing for all, which is victim and perpetrator.
Mhm.
And that is actually driven into the Jewish tradition. They don't have hell. The
Mhm.
entire Old Testament, there was
Doesn't talk about it.
no
Yeah.
speaking about hell.
Right.
Yeah, so why is
Nothing.
it such a thing in the New Testament? Like, well, all of a sudden
Yeah,
when
I
it
mean,
was
I think
translated?
I think just like some of the Old Testament writers got it wrong because they were on their own journey in some ways and got it right in some ways, they're humans. I'm going to
Yeah.
say things on this podcast that are wrong. And I'm going to say
Yeah.
things that are right or good or whole or whatever. I'm going to say things that are damaging. I'm trying not to,
Right.
but that's just the human journey. And so when I really lean into that idea of shalom and justice, where it's true flourishing for all,
Mm.
that feels really good inside of me. I think the
Mhm.
media has been helpful in portraying that, like Breaking Bad, like
Mhm.
Walter White. Listen to his story. Figure out what the heck happened to him to get him to this place. Like I have a friend whose son is grown up to be a pedophile.
Yeah.
Like that's just what's true. And it's not okay. And he was sexually abused as a kid, and he's not okay.
Mhm.
And he's in jail, and no one, including all Christians, will go visit him. And he's hated by the murderers in prison. You
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah,
he's
there's, like,
hated by
levels
like
of
the
sin.
levels.
Yeah. Mhm.
We're just leveling it out so we don't feel that bad about ourselves.
Mm.
But you know what? It's just so I guess I just feel like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what people's stories are, and I have no idea the generational trauma that's come down to them and why this made them. And do we need to put boundaries around these people for our
Yeah.
own sake? I mean, like
Yeah.
there needs to be really major boundaries put in place for our own protection, right? I'm really big into that. But would
We
I
just
want
had
those
a
people to be healed here and now?
Yeah.
Absolutely, because
Yeah.
then their stories are even more powerful. Would I want love to be able to reach into the depths of their soul now, currently? Yes, and we've seen stories like that. There's scriptural stories like that, Paul being a big one.
Sure.
Yeah, true.
True flourishing for all people, both victim and perpetrator, gives me the ability to have grace for my perpetrator former self. The amount
Oh,
of
yeah.
damage I did
Right.
Mm.
in my former beautifully tender, wonderful, unhealed self, and I'm still doing it, and I'm still not there. The journey's not finished, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, if I don't have that, then I can't have true I mean, I'm gonna cry. If I can't do that for myself, how can I do that for anybody else? And if I don't have grace for myself, how do I have grace for anybody else? For my kids, for the people I come in contact with, if I can't hold, and this comes another beautiful thing that came from my oldest, like be tender with your former self, as
Mhm.
harmful and as horrible as you were.
Mm.
Like be tender with those parts of you, because guess what? You are the victim and the perpetrator.
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, I hear my old judgmental self coming into my new brain all the time.
Same. Yeah.
I mean, it's
Esther,
just not
it's
like,
crazy how
"Bye." Oh,
similar. Yeah.
I actually did a little cute Instagram reel today on our Deconstructing Mamas of like, it was like, "What kind of nonsense are you?" It was like some audio. It's like, "What kind of nonsense and are you saying over and over and over again?" And I wrote at the top of it, my f me listening to my former self talking. I mean,
Mm.
it's like, "What are you even saying?" It's like
Yeah.
harmful and terrible, and yet I still live under her judgment at times
Mhm.
and fear, and so the only thing I can do is hold her with love, tenderness, and compassion.
I'm totally with you in this. We just
Yeah.
talked about this yesterday. We recorded an episode together called The Apology Tour, and we talked about, how our old selves, but I think we started off thinking it was gonna be funny, and we were gonna be, like, talking about how funny it was that we used to do things, and then we realized we need to show ourselves some grace. We
Mhm.
need to be kind to I called it little Leslie and little Karen,
Yeah.
Mhm.
baby Karen, baby Leslie, because we really just were doing the best we could with what we knew, and we were so afraid. And when somebody's afraid, like fear is a huge motivator. It'll make
Yeah.
you do things that, especially desperation.
Yes.
Desperation and fear are the most dangerous motivators. And as a mother wanting to save her children, I did the best I could. I thought
Yeah.
they were going to hell. And my gosh, if you think your kids are going to hell, you will do whatever it takes to get them out of there.
I really
And
like that word,
yeah,
the
it's
desperation.
Yeah, that's what it is. And then of course,
Mhm.
it's funny, you fit right here. I mean, Esther, good grief. Everything you've just said, I'm like, yep,
Sure.
and
Yep.
so was Karen. We both are just we were so motivated by fear and
Oh
like wanting to save the world and having that like desire, like, okay, if this is reality, if there is a hell, let's do everything we can. Let's give our entire lives to making
yeah.
sure nobody goes there.
Yeah. I mean, if you do believe in hell, you
Yeah.
need to be doing that. I
Yeah,
mean, this is
exactly.
like, I always
Why
think
aren't
like,
you?
Yeah,
why is anybody just going to work? I mean,
exactly.
People are going
I
to
just,
hell.
Exactly.
I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh my, I mean, like, so yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me why there's the people standing on the street corner
Yeah.
and have given up their whole lives because they actually
Repent.
probably
Yeah.
are living in more integrity than the people who are just like going to work, like
Yeah,
Yeah.
afraid to talk
that,
about their faith because they
right.
don't want
That's
people to
like
think they're
so,
silly.
right, right. The
Yeah.
desperateness of that is huge.
If you really believe it, if you really believe it, you will not keep your mouth shut. And
Right.
that's I think the 3 of us, we really believed it. We
Yeah.
really believed it.
There
And
was a time uh, in my journey where 4 young children at the time, and my husband and we were going hard after God and college ministry and doing all the things. And I was desperate for God. And I struggled with anxiety and depression. I am going to cry just thinking about the struggle was so real with me and just begging God continually to take it away, and
mm,
asking myself over and over, what is wrong with me? Like, what is wrong with me? And then just believing when people would say, well, of course, you're a sinner. Everything
yeah,
is wrong with you. You're
Mhm.
evil to the core, So, okay. So that's what's wrong with me. Um, but I was one of those people who took it seriously. And I remember we were in a church that was a church plant of Francis Chan. So it was his worship pastor who was leading us in Columbus. And so we were serious about God. There was no lukewarm and loving it. We were serious. And I was the most serious.
Mm.
And of our whole group, of all the leader, like I just was so intense. And we lived in Columbus. Ohio State was our school, the Ohio State. We're watching, and they would want to watch a football game on Saturday. And I would be like, what in the hell are we doing? Like, we cannot watch this football game. And I remember Francis he did a sermon and he talked about his grandma, I think, and that she was sitting at his daughter's play or whatever. And it was intermission and she's crying. And Francis said, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she said, I just don't understand why I'm sitting here and the Lord could return any minute and I'm not out telling people about Jesus. Like, what am I doing watching this play? And that became like my life. Like, I was like, what are we doing? We need to be telling people, like, if this is real, like, what are we doing? And I
yeah,
would say that all the time. And since things have changed and the deconstruction and the journey and all of that, right now, my Detroit Lions, who haven't won in 30
Ah!
years.
I'm cheering. I'm
What?
cheering. I'm cheering. I'm an
Let's
NFL.
go.
I'm an NFL. That's what makes my heart come alive. Sitting on Sundays watching the NFL. Sorry,
Oh, I'm
I'm
so
cheering.
I love
into
it.
it right now. I am so in. I am so in. And nobody in my family can believe it. I wake up and I watch Good Morning Football and I'm
Okay, this is
so
where we're
in.
different, ladies. I hate football. I
It's
hate
okay.
it.
You're allowed to be you.
It's okay. It's okay. But my Lions.
Yeah.
And but there's this whole thing inside of me still that is like,
Mhm,
I can still feel that angst of, should I
mhm.
Right?
actually be doing this? Am I wasting my life? John Piper might say that I'm wasting my life
Oh,
right now, like just
Yeah,
trying to find joy in the simple things. And my
right.
husband's like great with it. He's like, oh, you're here.
Yeah,
You're
you're
living
here.
yeah, you're
You actually
actually
get to live
here.
a human life. Imagine that. We were given our lives to actually live them. Imagine that.
Imagine
One of
it.
the things I was thinking as you were talking, Karen, because of course I picture myself in that scenario being like, what am I doing here? I should be preaching.
Yeah.
And is sort of, as I call it, or as I've been told, the slippery slope that leads to destruction. It's
Yeah.
now this water slide that leads to life. I'm like, oh my
I
God, I'm
love
on the
that.
water slide that leads to life and joy. And I just dove off the deep end. And guess what? Underneath it all, there's all these creatures I never even knew existed.
Yeah.
And there's beauty and wonder. And but on this other side, on this water side where I feel free and there's life, and it's hard at the same time, right?
Sure.
Freedom
Yes.
is,
Yes.
freedom is hard fought. Let's put it that way.
Mhm.
We have a lot of people who want, and a lot of systems, not even people, that want to keep us in
In
not
check.
free and in
Yes.
change and in chains and check and whatever. But I think like it's so incredible to me that I get to know people, hear their,
Mhm.
like, just know them, like, be with them, accompany them, have no agenda for them. I get to
Mhm.
just experience my husband, my children, my Jewish neighbor, the Muslim guy who's pumping my gas. I get to hear their people's actually lived stories
Right.
without some crazy agenda of I need to get them to church. I
Yes.
need to get
I
them
need to
the
change their
I need
mind.
to change them. I need it's so and that isn't that what unconditional love is?
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
it's like God is unconditionally loves us, but
Yeah. But you need to
Right.
believe this way. You need to check
yes,
this box. You can't look at that journey because that
yeah,
might take you down the wrong path. You know,
right.
and I'm learning that with every journey that we are experiencing on this podcast, it's like you're taking us down a path and I'm picking some flowers because you told me I could. And then I'm going to put them in a vase and I'm going to take them with me back on my path. Whereas I
Mhm.
think before I was like, if I go down that path and I listen to her story, she's going to influence me off of my path and maybe even push me off the mountain.
Right. No.
And it's not true. Like, let me learn from you because there are things just like with the Buddhist thing you said, I didn't really like this part, but man, I like that part. You picked some flowers, Esther. You put them
Right.
in your pocket. You were like, I'm going to take this with me. This is beautiful. But then you
Yes.
left what you didn't want. And then guess what you did? You got back on Esther's path. And
Esther's
then
path. I know.
there is
Yeah.
nothing wrong with this. This is what I believe God had intended for us all along. And
Yeah.
religion has said, stay on your path, just look for heaven. Don't look around, don't
Right.
enjoy the view. You just got to focus on heaven.
I
Yeah.
would love to hear, Esther, I would love to hear you mentor little me
Uh,
and just spiritually come alongside, companion me for just a minute and
Oh,
just
yeah.
help me. It's January in Indiana, so it's not pretty. And there's no, I mean, it's been raining for a week, cold rain. You can't even get out and walk in it, right? And so the anxiety and depression that I have dealt with, and that's what led me to your podcast in the first place years ago, was just hearing Liz's story. I
mhm.
think through her dad, I heard, I think, and going, okay, I understand this. I understand anxiety and depression. And we go around this bin. Um, Leslie helps me. She talks me through some things, but I would love it if you would help me when you say you're gonna listen to this person and say, I'm gonna take this and I'm not gonna take this. Growing up the way I grew up, same as you in the Christian world, leading people, trying to lead, I was a little evangelist, telling kids, you don't want to get left here, you don't want to get left behind, you don't want to get your head chopped off,
Oh yeah,
you
the
know,
rapture. Oh my gosh.
all the things. That was my big thing that's how I led people to the Lord at age 9.
Yes.
But um I would always then go with, well, this person, John Piper said this, so it
Mhm.
must be true.
Mhm.
Francis Chan said this. Louis Giglio said this. I was always, and people would say that, oh, you heard that in a sermon, did you? Like, you should go to the word and
Mhm.
all the things. But then the pastors would say, you can't trust yourself.
Mhm.
You trust me. your heart is wicked. So you don't trust yourself. And I
Mhm.
would get so confused because I'd be like, so I can trust you even though your heart's probably wicked too. Like
Oh, yeah.
I don't get it. But I learned not to trust myself.
Yeah.
Very much so. You can't trust and so teach me,
Oh,
Esther. You
I
you have
mean,
19 minutes, Esther. Teach me how to trust myself as a
I mean,
54-year-old grandma.
winter, I mean, I
Oh,
am going on a journey about rewilding my soul, so I'm embracing the season stuff. So I actually am this crazy person now that has, because I had seasonal affective, just to deal with that seasonal
Mhm.
affective disorder, and I told myself all kinds of things like winter is bad. There's a whole big giant thing that you can dive into if anybody out there wants to dive into it, just about our it's called solar spirituality. God is light.
Mm,
God is darkness is bad. Wintering is the awful.
sure.
Everywhere we just get that constant. And so I've gone on a personal journey of trying to embrace the seasons and what they have to teach us. My life's work is going to be is a book called The Gifts of the Darkness. So that's going to be a
Mm,
long time coming. And it's really diving into what is now called like lunar spirituality, which is what do we learn in the dark. But anyhow, that's just an aside. That's a whole other
I
podcast.
love it. I love it.
I could go on and on and on. But um, I would say that the trusting yourself piece does come out of that
mhm,
because we've been told that our hearts are dark
Yes.
and our hearts are wicked, and
Mhm.
darkness cannot be trusted,
mhm,
right?
Right.
It's
Right.
everywhere. I mean, it's not just in spirituality. Darkness cannot be trusted, and our hearts are dark. They're
Right.
deceitful. It's just a weird, like, thing that has been come out of scripture about this desperately wicked thing. And I would say, um, a book that really helped me on that front is a book called Original Blessing
Ooh.
by my spiritual director, whose name is Danielle Schroyer. And she says, why are we going to Genesis 3 and not going to Genesis 1?
Right.
Right? Where we are created good, where everything is good, everything God made is good. Why do we have the focus on Genesis 3? And I will just say this. I think it was ancient peoples trying to make sense of their world. They were living in a world where people were killing people and, very tribal and all that. They're just trying to make sense of it. And they're saying, like, well, how do we explain this other than that there was some like big crazy thing? God made us good, but then there was this thing that happened and we got really bad. And now that's where we are all the time. Like,
Yeah.
and that's who we are at our core, because they didn't necessarily have the information that they needed at the time to see the goodness of
Mm.
humanity or whatever. I don't
Yeah.
quite know. They probably did have both, but I just think, like, if we really just want to go straight to the Bible, whoever's listening, and you still love the Bible, and I love the Bible. I mean,
Me
yeah.
too.
I know
Sure.
way too much of the Bible. I mean, because it was my idol for so long.
Yep.
But anyhow, uh, if we go just there, like, start with what actually happened instead of what start with what happened at the very, very beginning. And like that goes back to before the world told you who to be. What did
Yeah.
God say? What is true about you? What's
Mm.
your deepest inner self? Is it good or is it bad? And if it's good, and if it's the image bearer of God,
Yeah.
which that is just also baffling to me now that I'm on the other side, why can't you trust it?
Mhm.
If you're the image bearer of God, why can't you trust yourself? Now, the truth is, there are times I trust my, I have to say, I can trust my most healed self,
Yeah.
but I don't necessarily how it plays out. If I'm in an anxiety loop, it's not really time for me to trust the anxious, unhealed self. Right? So
Yeah.
that's where it's like,
That's
it's not like I trust myself at the expense of everybody else. That's
Yeah.
like, it's kind of like, oh, but it just puts ourselves in a different place of I have to almost swing, like do that pendulum swing of I was never allowed to trust anything. So maybe
Right.
I can just dive into like, actually, I trust myself on that, like we take baby
Yeah.
steps
Baby
because,
steps.
why heck, like, and I think the whole body thing comes in and we aren't listening to, I mean, it's such a big subject, but like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm hungry. Wow. I don't have to deprive myself. I'm not a glutton. I'm hungry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
Oh,
happens.
I'm
I'm
not like a
human.
pervert. I'm
Yeah,
sexual. I'm
Right.
not a, like we
Yeah.
just just those little switches, right? Just those little tiny
I
things of
love that.
like,
mm,
I'm not a wicked, terrible person because I have needs.
right.
I'm human. It's like, oh, just like that, like little tiny voices that it's like, I just need to listen to myself. That's the first step to trust
So good.
yourself. I need to
Yeah.
listen to myself every morning. I'll tell you the two differences. Every morning in my old self, I would
Uh-huh.
wake up and say, what is wrong with you?
That's yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
In this new way of thinking, I get up every morning and I say to myself, what do you need?
Ooh.
Yowza.
Why does that make
And you
me
know
wanna
what?
cry?
Right? It's just
Oh,
different. And there might be something wrong with me. Maybe I didn't get enough sleep. Maybe there could be
sure.
something, but it's not like just picture yourself bending down to your 7-year-old self or your child.
Mm,
Right? Let's just take ourselves, our 7-year-old selves. And it's that principal's office voice of, what is wrong with you? Instead of that tendering, nurturing heart of God that takes that little child into his lap or her lap, let's just
Yes.
say it,
I love that. I love
her
that I can
lap,
think that
the
now.
nurturing,
I think
mothering
it's
heart of
biblical.
God that says, honey, what's wrong? What do
Mm,
you need?
yeah.
Two
What's wrong is
vastly different views of ourselves
Yeah.
and God.
Not
what
what's
is wrong
wrong,
too.
but
Well,
what's
what is
wrong,
wrong is even better than what is wrong with me.
right?
Those are 2 they're actually they're 2 different things
And
too.
the tone of voice in your head,
Mhm, mhm.
Oh, my voice oh,
oh, the voice in
I'm
your head.
such a bitch to myself.
Yeah,
Can you
and
point
it's
that
not
out?
your fault. I mean, it's been your brain has been wired for
Yeah, babe.
so long
So
with the
long.
what is
Ah,
freaking wrong with you? I
yeah.
mean, like everybody said it everywhere all the time. My friend jokes, she's so funny. When I was first deconstructing, and I was just starting to ask questions, and she was way further on. She would go, every sermon, you go in there, just these three things. It's going to be for every sermon. God is good. You're not. Stop it.
Yeah. Stop it.
Yes!
And
Mhm.
that is the
Ah,
sum up of what is wrong with you? Do you know
yep,
God is so good to you? What is wrong with you? And now stop it. And you're just like, how do I stop? How do
Ugh,
I and I
yep.
can't stop.
I can't
I
do
pray.
anything more. All I
I
do is try
pray.
to save people from hell. I don't have time for myself. I'm worried
Yeah.
about everybody else.
So
Yeah.
that would be what I would say to a person in my spiritual director practice. I would be like,
Mm,
hey, tell me the voice that's in your head.
Yeah,
Tell me
mm,
that voice. And you said to me, and I listened to you, and you were saying, you were like, what is wrong with me? I can't stop.
yep.
And then I would say, what if you would say to yourself the next time, what do you need?
I
What
love
would
that.
that voice? So then it's us discovering within ourselves, right? It's asking ourselves. It's not, it's a crazy external versus internal shift.
And
yeah,
I love
it
what you
really is.
said, trust your most healed self.
Yeah,
Mm,
Like,
trust
there's a difference. Like, is that my healed self speaking, or is that my
yeah, right.
the places that still need
Right,
healing?
and if it's fear, it's not your to go
Right.
all the way back
Ah,
to the fear thing. If it's based in fear, if you're being pushed by fear, it's your unhealed self.
mm.
That's a very easy thing for me anyway
Yep.
to do. If it's
well,
your anxious, fearful, treadmill, yeah,
yeah.
fix it,
Yeah.
like controlling self. But if it's if the voice feels like a loving place, and
Yeah.
it's, I
That's your
don't
healed self.
know, that's your more
Yeah.
healed self.
Well, and don't be so hard on your unhealed self either,
No,
Karen.
right.
Oh,
Like
that's good too.
you are very mad all the time at scared Karen. You're always mad that she's scared.
Yeah.
And that, you know what? She doesn't know any different.
Yeah,
Remember, we
no.
went through a exercise yesterday where, on the podcast that was last week, um, we talked about how if you come at a situation that was painful and hurtful to you, I mean, and maybe it's even something you've said to yourself, and
Mhm.
you say, okay, this is this perspective from me. When I thought this to myself, I felt this way and this is how it made me feel and these are the emotions that came up. But then you stop and you tell it from the perspective of the voice. Well, I did that because I wanted to protect you and I wanted to, and
Mhm.
I'm scared for you. And then when you start to understand that perspective is everything, of
Mhm.
course that voice is doing that. I get why you're upset. Now sit down and be quiet for a minute because I
Mhm.
want to tell you why we don't have to be afraid anymore.
Yeah.
And having these, I know it sounds weird, but having
Yep.
these conversations with those voices that were literally put into your mind
Yep.
by someone else.
Yep.
Having these conversations is not crazy. It is
Right.
called
Sure.
taking your power back.
Yeah.
And I think as women, we need to learn to do that more, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that. One example that came up to me this past weekend on my intensive was we do dream work, and it's very different than I can't even, I'm not going to describe it because I can't. But one of the things you do in dream work is you become an object in your dream or something in your dream, and you ask 7 magic questions. And one of the questions is, I really like this object because it has done because of X. And the object I picked in the dream was a lie. Okay, something that I've been told all my life was terrible, right? I was a lying little kid all the time because I was scared out of my mind, right? Just
Yeah.
lied all the time. I brought that everywhere with me. And when I became the lie, when I said, oh, you have to say, I am the lie. And then you have to say, the reason I'm glad I'm the lie, that's what it was.
Oh,
And I said, the reason I'm glad I'm the lie um, is because I'm protecting myself.
Mm.
yeah.
And then you go into the reason I'm not glad I'm not. It's other things, but I thought, what a different framing instead of what is wrong with you, you liar, you. And then it's like, what did you need? What do
Mhm.
you need that you have to lie? Oh, well, I don't feel safe. I don't feel held. I'm
So
scared you're
good.
going to be mad at me. I'm scared you're going to leave. I don't, that's what that does, right? That's that you said, Leslie, that inner dialogue we have with our new self, our old self, our babe, our child self, our all those
Yeah, there's
things.
so
It's
many
like
selves in there.
all the
Let's all be
parts, right?
real.
It's so great. It's like, yes,
Yeah.
that's just
Mhm.
one little example to me of what you're saying. It's like, wow, that wasn't evil. It was necessary. And this is why. And this is
Yeah.
what, and do you need it anymore? Like you said, Leslie, I don't need that anymore. I'm safe. I'm not
Mhm.
abandoning you, you little girl. I'm not. I'm here.
Your heart was in the right place. You were trying to protect us, and I get that.
Yeah.
I have a
We're good there.
counselor that does internal family systems
Oh,
with
yeah, yeah,
me.
yeah.
Mhm.
So it's a boardroom and there's,
Yeah, yeah.
healed Karen speaking to all the little Karens or whatever. And at one point she's like, because I definitely have a Karen that I need, like you're saying, and I wrote it down that I need to just say, what do you need?
What do
And
you
I
need?
understand that you're trying to protect because I have health anxiety. So every little thing that comes up on my face, on my anything, I'm dying. And right
Oh, no,
now,
Karen, you and I need to have a conversation after about that.
I would love to.
Yeah.
I,
I'm
really?
just saying solidarity, babe.
No, listen,
Okay.
I've told her
Okay.
that too. I'm like, "Girl, same thing." But
Yeah.
and
But
we were talking earlier, and it's like God, I believe God gives us grace for the moment. I do believe that because I've seen it in my life, you know. But like he doesn't give us grace for like what we imagine to happen. And so I told her, I said, when you get to that point where you're like, "Oh, I feel anxious about that," it's because you're not actually, it's not really happening. Because when something does happen, it's like a miracle. Like you feel like I can do this because you don't have a
yeah.
choice. But
Mm,
if you're feeling like, oh, this, and you're making these things up in your imagination, God isn't the God of the imagination. We are. And so when we are the God of our imagination, we're going to go in all kinds of places in our mind. Whereas if we just say, if this was happening, I would have grace. So clearly it's not, I'm going to choose not to go there,
But
which is,
figuring out that I have grace
yeah.
for that.
Hmm.
So being able to little Karen, little anxious anxiety Karen, being
Oh,
able like and what I was going to say was my counselor was like, you need to tell that little Karen she needs a nap. Like you go
You need
ahead.
to nap.
I love you. Go
you're
take a
tired.
nap.
You need
We
to go
got
take a nap.
this. We're okay. We don't need to
Yeah.
go
And
to the doctor today.
and
Go take
someone's gonna
a nap.
take care of you. And someone is
Ah,
going to take care of you.
Oh,
yeah.
That is okay. When you need it, you will have what you need.
yeah.
Someone is
Always.
going to take care of
Yeah.
you
I
and
love
not
that.
dismiss you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep.
I honestly think it's the age, ladies, because we're now at midlife. We've got, maybe some of us have ailing parents. We are losing friends. We have seen a little more as we get older. And I think the truth is, I think mortality is a little more
Mm.
of something that we're thinking of. That's a very, I think, normal
Yeah.
thing. I think
I
and
would
I think
say,
that's
yeah.
that's why we're there. We
Yeah.
just don't want that. Plus, you know what, girls, think about it. We just learned how to live,
Yeah, true.
and
Well,
we
and
don't wanna lose
yeah.
this yet. We're
I
not ready
I
to die.
yeah, I have like a little different take. I actually have way less fear now that I'm older.
Yeah.
I had actually had that so much when I was in my 30s raising my kids about
Yeah.
the fear of dying and everything.
Sure.
And I just said to my husband, I did a I did a and we're going to run out of time here, but
Yeah.
I actually did a visualization this last weekend of my deathbed, and it was
Mhm.
the best thing that I've ever done in relationship with this issue I have with my health anxiety. It was talk about peace that passes understanding, way more than I ever got in any other kind of circle. It was absolutely stunningly beautiful. It was
I
so, but I wouldn't have been able to do that 20 years ago, in the throes of my physical body just being completely out of control with anxiety.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
So,
okay, I
that's
know we're
good.
running out of time, but Esther, please elaborate just a little bit. What did that look like? I'm sorry, because
uh,
we're gonna go a little over today because we love this conversation,
are you
and that's how we
sure?
are. Oh, I'm
Well, and just
positive.
Karen, I think like one of the things I have discovered, well, the first thing about even just having that phobic fear of death, I mean, I just had, just taking care of my body. Just the whole, like, what do you need was a big thing. But this weekend, and I wouldn't have been ready for it. And I watched some younger friends of mine who are really in the throes of parenting and struggling with their health anxiety. And like phobic, I'm talking phobic. Like I can't go to the doctor. I can't get a
Sure.
mammogram. I mean, I'm going to the mammogram and I can't even handle it because what is it
Yep.
going to tell me? And blah, 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 all those things, whatever.
Yep.
And so it was a death doula at our spiritual direction practice. This is why
Mhm.
everyone should be a spiritual director because the stuff you get to learn is crazy. She is a hospice worker. She's a medical
Yep.
professional. So she's a doctor. She's a physician that left the medical world and now has opened up this death doula practice. And she works with hospice. And basically, they had us go into just picture, imagine our deathbed. Where are we? What are our smells? What are all those things? And the most powerful thing was who's with you.
Mhm.
And I had my 4 kids. My husband was gone. He was not there. But had my 4 kids. They were each themselves, a little bit older, and it was all the things about them. My daughter she's a teacher slash florist, and she had placed flowers right by my face. My youngest daughter was at my feet playing her guitar. They were all, and this was the most beautiful part about it. They were all them completely themselves in the dream, like the thing. So she was playing the guitar, but she had dabbed on her Vera Wang princess, um, that she had worn since she's 13, like that I still want to smell all the time when she's home. She had dabbed that on my neck so that I could smell that. And then my son, who's really an introvert and he's quiet, he was sitting at my other foot and he was just looking at me, not speaking at all, which is so him, and just saying, I see you, mom. I see you. Like I could feel like he just would not take his gaze off my eyes. Like I was locked with his eyes. And then my oldest son, he's second born, was at my side, and he's a physical touch. And he had told me when he was 20 that the greatest fear he had in his life was the day I died.
Cool.
And he was laying on me, weeping. And I turned to him because he's my hardest kid, my kid that probably changed me for all the best ways, and probably is the reason why I'm here talking about this. I said to him, "You're going to be okay without me. You have you." And it was so beautiful. It was so moving. You're crying. I'm crying still.
Sorry.
It was so beautiful that I was like, I don't have to be afraid anymore.
Yeah.
I don't, even if my death is totally different from that, I have this imagining to hold me now.
That's beautiful.
Ooh.
I have the imagining to hold space for me when I go to that freaking mammogram.
No, that's
Because
so good.
Because
mean-
it's inside of me. This has come from inside of me. This is what I want. This is my death. This is what I'm going to make happen. Like, I don't care if it's only, and if I'm all alone at the end of my journey in a room and my kids can't get there or they're missing,
You still have that.
I will still have that.
That's beautiful.
I will close my eyes and it'll be that way.
And I will say that the biggest fear that I had in my 20s and 30s with my little kids was that I was going to be on my deathbed and they were going to
Not have a mom. Yep.
and I was going to have to say goodbye to them.
Yep.
And so I'm not kidding you. I believe in God, because what you're saying, we have a small group that meets, that we have in people that are going to try to change that will change our views on life, like not try to talk us into it, but we want to hear it. And we just had in 2 hospice workers, and they listen to Honoring the Journey, Leslie. So they will hear this, but they're hospice workers. One's a chaplain and the other is a nurse. And they were talking about death doulas. And I just was like, and I told them that night, I said, my parents both went through hospice. They both died in my house. I held both of their hands as they passed away 8 years apart. And it was beautiful. And my kids were right there for them. And they were doing that. I had my son on a guitar. We were dancing. We were laughing. I held my parents' hands and walked them right into the arms of Jesus. Right. And I love that I could think through it for myself now. Like that is beautiful. What you just said and did is beautiful.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And I think my favorite thing about it was,
oh goodness,
just to go back to the very beginning of the podcast and what we talked about is everybody in the room was themselves.
I love that.
Everybody got to be themselves, and there was no agendas in the room. Like they were just themselves, fully themselves. And I was like, there's nothing I want more than that for me, for Leslie, for Karen, for whoever, for my co-host Liz, for anybody who ever reads any of my stuff. There's nothing. And I actually believe in my soul of souls that there's nothing God wants more for us than that.
Oh.
Whew. Esther, can you
Holy
come back
smokes.
again one time? Because we want you back. We're going to be like, okay, it's Esther Day. Let's talk to Esther again.
No, it's so good to talk to you guys.
Oh, I know. I love this.
It's so interesting because I'm like you guys. I spend a lot of time with people 15, 20 years younger than me because of the journey
Which
that
is
I
great.
feel so alone in. And
Yeah.
it's so great. I feel so grateful. But to be in a space where I feel very held and understood, and that's what you guys are doing for your listeners. I don't know what to say. It's like, too. I'm like, maybe I should change our podcast. No, I'm kidding. We're doing a good work.
Yes, you are.
Well,
We're doing our part. We're being ourselves. So there
we
you go.
are, and I
Absolutely.
think that's the beauty of all of it, and I think
Right.
there's room for lots of people who are willing to do this and put themselves out there and connect with people and speak
Yeah.
to the heart of the invisible, you know, like
Yeah.
all there's just so much room for that, and we're just a space for midlife mamas who are
Yeah.
going through it, which is
Yep.
apparently there's a lot more than we realized because, we're hearing from people now and they're like, I thought I was the only one.
Yeah.
And I just remember reaching out to people when I was invisible and saying, I can't believe you just said what you said. I am not the only one. Are you kidding me? I'm
Yeah.
not the only one feeling this way. And that's what it's about. But Esther, I know we've kept you way too long,
Oh
but
no, it's
girl, we just want
Oh,
to say right now, like Karen and I, we honor your journey and we thank you so much for
fine.
sharing your perspectives and your wisdom and your journey and all of it with us because this is going to be a conversation I'm not going to forget for a long time. And
oh,
and if I do, I'm going to listen to it again.
me
Aw,
too. Can't wait to hear
yeah.
it again.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us, our sweet little listeners. We have so enjoyed getting to know you on our Facebook page, and please make sure you join it. And it's just a little community of people, private. We go on there like once a week, and one or two people pop on with us right now, and we
Yep.
just talk about life and answer questions and so we would love to have you there. And also, if you want to just send us an email, it's honoringthejourneypodcast@gmail.com. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you next week on Honoring the Journey.